On the eve of Super Tuesday, political pundit and blusterer-in-chief Chris Matthews abruptly resigned from his job as host of MSNBC's Hardball. And apparently it was a deal orchestrated by people closest to him. Over the years, Chris Matthews has had his fair share of run-ins, face-offs, controversies, and boorish behavior.
Thank you, dear. She's a beautiful woman. You're a knockout. I'm not allowed to say this, but I'll say it. You're beautiful.
Apparently there were other things he wasn't allowed to say but did. In an article for GQ, culture writer Laura Basset said while she was getting made up to go on Hardball, Matthews made her feel uncomfortable, saying things like, "Why haven't I fallen in love with you yet?" More recently, he was condemned for badgering Elizabeth Warren.
You believe he's lying.
I believe the woman.
You believe he's
which
lying.
means he's not telling the truth.
And why would he lie?
Matthews also took heat for comparing Bernie Sanders' win in Nevada to the fall of France to Nazis. According to the Daily Beast, MSNBC bosses met with Matthews over the weekend. The result, his last day on air.
Let me start with my headline tonight. I'm retiring. This is the last Hardball on MSNBC.
Matthews went on to say it's time for the younger generation to take over, saying they've made the workplace better, fairer.
A lot of it has to do with how we talk to each other. Compliments on a woman's appearance that some men, including me, might have once incorrectly thought were okay. We're never okay. Not then and certainly not today.
True, then again, Matthews' colleague at MSNBC has a point, too.
There's a sense of easy outrage, and the outrage quickly becomes toxic.
That's for sure.
Till we meet again.
I have to say, I thought that Laura Bassett's piece in GQ was really over. She had written about it before and said but without identifying him. But for GQ to then put that in, it didn't seem to rise to that level. That's why I agree with Mike Barnacle to a point that it was, the outrage was misplaced on that. I mean, you know, she felt uncomfortable. I mean, okay, but does it rise to the level of some of the things that Matt Lauer or Bill O'Reilly or some of these...
Or a friend of Morning Joe, Mark Halperin.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not at that level. I mean, I think a lot of things came into play. He had been kind of...
I think you're right about that.
You know, he had been sort of tripping on, he speaks so quickly, and he just was blurting things out. Apparently his wife was very concerned that he was going to make an idiot of himself, and she intervened.
I'm wondering to what extent this exit, the way he left, also has to do with the ratings. I mean, if his ratings were much better, would this have been orchestrated? I mean, I generally found it wasn't, full disclosure, not one of my favorites. I thought he was kind of obnoxious, and you know, a lot of the statements, you know, again, I never wrote a letter complaining. Like a lot of people, they just kind of watched it and they go, "Really, you're saying that?" And it doesn't quite cross the line, but it was kind of. You know, and I voted with my with a clicker. I changed the channel.
Remember when he made that comment about the thrill he felt going up his leg?
When
Obama was
when Obama spoke at the 2004 convention in Boston. And I always connect him with that when I think of Chris Matthews. I think
and by the way, I remember being there for the speech. It was an amazing speech. I don't get what he's talking about with the thrill going up his leg. That's just so weird. It's hard for me to see him as a victim, given that, as you mentioned, Emily, apparently his wife was saying he can't be doing what he's doing now. He's going to embarrass himself. Let's get him out of there. If had that not been reported, maybe I could say, okay, this doesn't rise to the level of Halperin at all. But that's pretty telling, I think.
But, you know, that point just amplifies the fact that this was a sloppy process. If they had this information, if they knew this, he should have been moved out of there a long time ago. And I think you see this time and time again with many of these high-profile cases on television. It's very difficult for them to kind of go off, you know, under normal circumstances, right? They just decided to retire. I think Brian Gumbel, to my knowledge, is the only person who was kind of at the top of his game at the Today Show and left and really didn't get pushed out. Why does that happen? Well, part of it is there's this sense of loyalty. Yes, it's ratings. If you have high ratings, they're going to keep you around. But it's also, there's certain people who are in power and they're loyal to other people. And in this case, the person running NBC is his former, you know, executive producer when that show was on CNBC. Exactly. And so, you know, it's a very difficult conversation to go to your buddy and say, you know, it's really time for you to get out of here. even though all signs point to the door.
You know, I think it is a lot of things, and I think that the fact that he works at NBC, at MSNBC, and there have been so many other previous cases at MSNBC, maybe there was a long history of misogynist behavior here, you know, and he always made comments. He's 74. His filter's not so good. I always found him very bombastic. At the same time, I never liked his interrupting. I'm kind of with Jorge. I was not a big fan, but at the same time, he generally called things like he saw them, and I appreciated his candor, and I think his general authenticity. You know, a lot of people don't realize he was in politics. He was here in Boston. I mean,
incredibly well informed.
He was chief of staff for Tip O'Neill for 6 years. You know, I mean, he'd been around.
He's a you know a history lover. He's you know very. He's one of those pundits that's just not off the cuff. He speaks from knowledge.
On that interrupting thing, I had done some live shots with him, and you have your earpiece in your ear, and while you are doing your report, he's always jumping in. He's always making these sounds, and it would drive me crazy. I can't even think of what I'm saying here because he's not shutting up. And I hated doing live. Nice guy, but I just hated doing live shots for him.
Anyway, I just hate to see people, you know, shown the door like that. And certainly, I thought it was bizarre and maybe even irresponsible of GQ to print. It's like, really? It just didn't rise to that level.
The same level as the others.
They sensed an opportunity, right? I mean, he was in the news for that exchange with Warren. It's being strategic.
The timing right before Super Tuesday was just
I was shocked that they actually let him appear on the air,
and
not knowing what he was going to say.
Which is bizarre.
That was bizarre.
To your point, one thing I'd love to know, and this is about organizational behavior generally, not just in journalism, I would love to know if any higher-ups there ever went to him and said, hey, Chris, we love you, but you got to tone this stuff down. You say things like this.
Well, they did over the Nazi thing, because he did apologize on air for that.
I'm thinking of the, you know, you're a beautiful woman. Look at you. You know, someone should have said 5 years ago, Chris.
Probably not.
But
that doesn't get good ratings.
That is like that's like 1995 sexual harassment training. You do not say
on the
air or any time make a comment about appearance.
Good lesson.
You look great today, Mike.
Yeah, you do as well.